All right. Well, welcome back to Playing It Safe. And I have one of my good friends here, Jorge Perez, back and joining us today for today's conversation. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we get some really good feedback and great comments. And I know we've had this conversation plenty of times, and it was actually brought up in some comments. There was a phrase mentioned of imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
And I know that we really wanted to cover that and really talk about it. And it needed its own segment to really talk about what imposter syndrome is. And what made you want to talk about this?
I think I think it's very common, right? I think from fellow faculty that we talk to, it's I think a problem that you see especially in people of color, right? Then any sort of minority like women in STEM, it's something that affects us. I think at a pretty real level.
Yeah, definitely. And for those of you wondering what imposter syndrome is, the American Psychology Association, and along with a few other sites, they describe imposter syndrome as an internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be. And also, so simply, it means that your experience of feeling like a phony, you feel as though at any moment you're going to be found out as a fraud, like you don't belong where you are, and you're only there through dumb luck. So it can really affect any of us, right?
Right,
But like you had mentioned, we have noticed that in a lot of people of color.
right.
And I actually didn't know what this was. Now um, this term was coined in the 1970s. Had no idea, right? And I think I want to say, and this term was brought in through some psychologists, Susanna Imes and Paulina Rose Clance, in the 70s, in the 1970s. I only learned about this term, I want to say, literally about 4 years ago,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I had no idea what it was.
yeah. It's pretty deep. Yeah, it's Um, I forget when I learned about it, but I think it was when I moved to this country for sure. Right, right. And I think particularly for people of color or just historically underrepresented groups, there's like several layers, right? Because it could be either from things that happen from infancy, from when you were a kid, right? Maybe a relationship with your parents, but then you can throw things like expectations from society, right? Or just stereotypes that might be out there that and they cause you doubt, right? And you
Hmm.
start doubting yourself. So there could be this strata of different factors why this might happen, and some groups will be definitely more um, affected, I think, than others for sure.
Definitely. And so some of this, if you guys are still wondering what it's about, don't worry, we're going to cover it some more. Some of the characteristics will include self doubt, your inability to have realistic expectations for your skills, right? Though you're contributing your success to external factors, you're berating your performance. You fear that you won't live up to the expectations. You're an overachiever. You sometimes sabotage your own success, and maybe you also set very very challenging goals and feel disappointed when you fall short of them. So those are just a few characteristics that I found.
Yeah. And then there's consequences of that, right? Like what happens, like for example, those goals are not fulfilled, right? The anxiety or maybe depression or things like that, right? It could be like a doorway to a lot of other different things.
Mm,
Yeah.
definitely. And what I learned in doing some more research on this, a lot of the information I'm bringing you is social anxiety disorder. And it's interesting that it's listed there because I think I've mentioned this before, but I used to go through severe anxiety panic attacks
Mm-hmm.
every Sunday night, like clockwork. I was cool all week, and then Sunday would hit. And I want to say, like, maybe about 4 or 5,
Right.
um, all of a sudden anxiety kicked in and I would start freaking out. And it's because Monday was about
Yeah.
to start. And so I couldn't associate the two, why I was having such panic attacks, like to the point where I thought I was gonna have to go to the hospital. And people are like, "That can't happen to you, Veronica. You seem like you got all your shit together." And it's like, no, like literally, I panic. I just hide it,
Right.
and I
Yeah.
pretend that I'm totally cool and I got it all together. But reality was, I had the fear that somebody was gonna call me out and call me a fraud for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I would get some similar, especially at the beginning of every school year when I was younger. Right. I would feel like, oh man, I should have done more in the summer. Right. I should have done this. I should have done that. And everybody else is gonna be well prepared, and you get to learn with time. A lot of that stuff you kind of create for yourself, right? I mean, there's something to be said about preparing and things like that, but a lot of those fights are fights that we create in our heads, and sometimes we're not in full control of creating them, right? They were created by things that happen, or just the society where we live, or the way we grew up. But nonetheless, it's a very real wall that's in front of us.
And also, I learned a new term more recently that's associated with imposter syndrome is stereotype threat. And what that basically means is you're working twice as hard not to only overcome what you think you are, but to eventually rise to what you know you can do. And really, what that means is you're working twice as hard proving someone wrong as opposed to proving someone right. And that's what um, J.L. Moore had mentioned. And it's so true in the stereotype threat where you're working twice as hard because you don't want people to classify you under specific stereotypes. I mentioned this earlier in our previous conversation where like maybe if you're a person of color, you're going to show up earlier to meetings because you don't want to be on, CPT time, color people time, as they mention it.
Right.
You don't want to be categorized with that. You're going to work twice as hard because you don't want to be outed as lazy, and you're I'm realizing now that the whole purpose of this, we're just trying to not fit into those stereotypes.
Right. Yeah, and this happens, where I work, the department where I work, I'm the only person of color, right? And so it certainly feels a lot of times like, well, are my actions gonna be taken as well? This is the representation of this particular group, right? And even if it's it might be just in the back of my head, but not in the back of my mind, but it's still there, right? And I see this a lot, especially in STEM, in women in STEM, right? I think that because women in STEM are definitely a minority, I think this imposter syndrome. I think there's a lot of tendency for women in STEM to doubt themselves, right? For no reason. It's just
Hmm.
okay. This is new. This is not what I'm used to. And when I talk to a few of my students, it's very clear. Sometimes they're the best student in the class, and they still have this like, I feel like I need to prove why I'm here and that I can do well and I can do good. And it's interesting how it creeps up on you without even knowing, and it's always there. And it's interesting also how much it can hinder you, right? Because it's like you're carrying this weight, right?
Yeah.
That it's always there, and you're always, either going the extra mile, or making sure that I put Mexican people up, because I
Hmm.
gotta do that, right? And the long term effects, I imagine, are pretty bad mentally, right? Like you're not careful with how much weight you're carrying and how much you're doing. I think the dangers of burning out or getting depressed or
Exactly.
anxiety and things like that are very real.
And surprisingly, when I was looking more about, let me get some actual information about, imposter syndrome, it was originally brought up just for women initially because, if you think about the 1970s, and I mean, yeah, we're in 2020, but we're still, we've really progressed, but there's still some, society still puts a lot of pressure on you. And so I can only imagine why it would be enforced with women originally, because women, that's a time where they're like, I'm gonna burn my bra,
Right.
and I'm gonna,
Right.
I'm gonna go out of what the society says. I'm gonna go work. I don't want to just be a housewife.
Right.
I don't want to, be told what I can and cannot do. I'm gonna, make my own rules. But then at the same time, women and they still are, but they were put under so much pressure, having to either choose your career or choose a family.
Right.
And even myself, that I have both, I find myself having to overcompensate in both. Like I have to
Right.
overcompensate at home because I'm not home enough. And then I have to overcompensate at work because I don't want people to be like, well, Veronica can't go because, she has kids. And I'm like, no,
Right.
send me. I'm the person that's going to be the best for this,
Right.
presentation or whichever. So yeah, that was, I mean, I could only imagine women in STEM or women
Right.
in fields that are male dominated.
Yeah. So imagine I can see, the like I was saying, the strata, right? So women of color in STEM,
Mm-hmm.
you can see like, okay, well, you belong to this group of women, and then women of color, and then women of color in STEM, right? There's like all these layers and all these kind of pressures, right, from the outside, let alone doing the work itself, which is, it's a tough whatever, profession you choose. But now you have all these layers and all these things to think about, and all this essentially, these things that you're facing, right? Because society is a very real thing, and so you'll see this whether it's at the workplace or at school, in academia, or even at home, like you were saying. So yeah, definitely, some groups will be definitely more threatened, I think, by this, and I think it makes sense, like what you're saying.
Yeah, and another thing I was looking at, when we're looking at imposter syndrome or stereotype threat, another example would be if you're working twice as hard because you're the only person of your racial group in that room.
Mm.
And so then you start thinking, maybe they think I just got hired because they needed to hit a quota, or yeah, I got hired, or I got accepted to school because I'm brown or black, or you're thinking these things because you're thinking that others are thinking it. So then you're you're trying to it's like a constant mental battle, right?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's very real, I think, in schools, right, with like acceptance. But like I was saying, also, it sometimes it comes from home, right? If you have a
Mm-hmm.
dysfunctional family, maybe you have alcoholic parents, or parents that were drug users or something, and unfortunately, sometimes they'll cast those doubts, those nets of doubts on you, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not this, you're that, right? And that's something you carry. That's something you take with you, right? And then if on top of that you add the social pressures, right? If you happen to come from, if you happen to be a person of color, a woman of color, and you go to certain um, careers and things like that, then it's actually going to compound quite a bit, right? And like you were saying, I think one thing that you said was really important, and certainly it happened to me. A lot of times you won't know why you feel the way you do.
Yeah.
You just feel something. You just feel like you're out of place. You feel like you're sad. You're
Yeah.
like depressed, and it's not even that you're doing it to yourself consciously.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the most dangerous place to be, because at that point you have no way of attacking it. You don't even know what's going on.
And I also think too, a lot of people of color have maybe experienced a lot of hardship. And I'm not saying other people don't experience hardship, but you experience so much that, like, when something's really good, you're always waiting.
Like, what's gonna happen?
What's gonna happen
Well,
next? Who's
yeah,
gonna pull the rug? Waiting for the shoe to fall. All these other, you're
yeah,
waiting for all those different things. So when you finally get to a point where you're excited about it, you're afraid to be excited about it because you feel it's very temporary, and you're waiting for the disappointment to
yeah.
kick in.
I think at that point we kind of stop believing. I was reading a book the other day, and it said you're entitled to miracles, right? And I think at
Mm,
some point we stop believing in that, right?
yeah.
At some point we say, no, I don't deserve that, right? It doesn't matter, like and that, I think, it's probably the most dangerous thing, when you internalize it and you believe it yourself, like, no, I don't deserve good things. The mind is interesting, because once you convince yourself of that, the mind will say, fine,
Yeah.
then we don't deserve that, right?
And I was talking to an individual earlier today, and he was talking about getting prepared to to interview. And in an interview, you have to really really talk about yourself and kind of brag, and you have to say like why you should hire me. I'm the best, hire me,
Right.
right? And I had mentioned, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, right? And so I learned, this individual had to go through a lot of obstacles, and so did his family. So I had brought the point where when everyone that surrounds you is working their ass off all the time
Right.
to just survive, and you finally got into a position of education. Now, mind you, not that you didn't work your ass off to get there, but everyone around you is working like labor jobs. They're working hard jobs, long hours, and here you are, working, a leisure job in a sense where you're not killing yourself. And yes, you're working hard, but we're not out there sweating. We got air conditioned. Hell, we got to work from home from the COVID.
Right.
They provide us all this stuff, and so then you don't think you're anything special because yes, you worked hard, but you see all your people, working hard. So it just makes you not brag about yourself
Yeah.
because you don't, and it's part of the imposter syndrome in a sense. You don't want to, I'm not nothing special because look at everyone around me is having to work harder than I am, and I just happen to get it easy. That dumb luck, as we mentioned earlier.
Right.
So that was just interesting to bring
Yeah.
that.
I think that's a really good point. I think I've seen that a lot, especially on my female students that come from very traditional, like Mexican families, for example,
Mm-hmm.
right, where it is not the norm for the daughters to go on to school. Right.
Yeah.
The norm is usually, you get married,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking very traditional here,
Yeah.
right? And so you see this doubt on the students, right? They'll say, am I doing the right thing? Am I even? It's not even that. It's am I supposed to even be doing this, right? Maybe
Yeah.
maybe I'm out of place, right? And the crazy and difficult thing about that is parents and family and this kind of social factors. A lot of times they're not consciously doing it. It's just like this is what happened. This is what happened
Mm-hmm.
100 years ago. So and I know I struggle a little bit with that with my parents, right? But it was mostly they just didn't know.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is where it takes a lot of courage. That's when you have to find out who you really are and,
Mm-hmm.
and what you deserve and what you're capable of. And that's when you have to really blindly believe in you, right?
Yeah.
And before others believe in you, especially if you're in this position, you have to blindly say, I'm just gonna roll the dice on this one. I'm gonna bet on me, right? And that's, I think, the one way you can escape this, right? And it may always be there, it may always be on the background, but that's the one way where you can say, oh, the last time I trusted myself and I went to that interview,
Yeah.
it worked out, so I'm gonna try it again,
Yeah.
right? That's how you can start kind of moving away from those doubts.
And I also agree with that. And just as you mentioned, we all need to believe in ourselves that we do all technically, we all deserve to be happy. Now, what we usually don't get what we deserve, right? In real life, we
Right.
don't usually, I deserve to be on vacation all the time. I don't get that, right? But if we can start saying I am worthy of these things regardless of my circumstances, we can, do better and be better.
Right.
One conversation I had with an individual over the weekend, Mother's Day weekend, I hung out with a bunch of awesome ladies. And I met this other lady who's a person of color, and she has a very high position in a company. And we were joking around, and hopefully I get to interview her eventually. We were joking around about like, people think we're geniuses in a sense, like, oh, you made it here somehow, you must be a genius, and it's like, no, these are common things that, like whatever industry you're in, you eventually, you'll learn it, if you like it, you'll learn it. And if you do it well, you just become great at it. It's just something that's,
Yeah.
part what we do, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just funny that we both started like talking, and we both realized that we had the same mentality. Where like, you know what, we know we are great at what we do, and not because we're geniuses or anything like that. It's just that we don't think this is a hard job. She's in a way different field, and she doesn't think it's hard. I don't think
Right.
this is hard. And so if we can start going like, you know what, I am a badass. I know my shit. I can get all
Mm.
this done. I know what I'm doing. I'm not anything. I'm not special because I know this. I just know it because I know it.
Right.
And so I think that's something that we need to get into, that mentality that I got this. Like
Definitely.
this is no biggie. I got it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? I think that might be also the imposter syndrome, right? These people that say, "Well, you're probably a genius.
Yeah.
That's why you're there." How much does that say about the person saying that, right?
Yeah.
Instead of the person saying, "Dang, you made it. I can make it too." Right?
Yeah.
Like if you made it, man, no, it's more like there's nothing wrong with me. I'm cool. You must be the genius, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
what I've done, it's all good, right? Like it's almost like internalizing the okay, well, this is my place, right? I'm not gonna look up, right? This is where I should be. And if anyone does better, it's because they're talented. They got some special, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a dangerous path, right? And because I've heard that too, right? Teaching math. Oh
Yeah.
man, you must be, well, I remember spending 12 hours a day doing math when I was
Yeah.
younger. Like I worked really hard for that, right? I don't know if genius is the right word, other than I worked real hard, just like an athlete would, just
Yeah.
like a musician would. And really, what you have to do is, do you want this? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then just kind of put the time. Yeah. If you
Exactly.
want to lose the weight, you want to learn a new instrument, it's gonna take time, right? But you have to keep going.
Yeah, no, we definitely have to keep going. And I love the sports analogy because, one, I love sports. But I always tell that to incoming students. I'm like, all right, you know, who plays baseball here? Who plays football? Who plays basketball? And, you get all these people raising their hands. And I'm like, oh, so when you first started playing baseball, were you able to get a home run on your first swing? And they're like, no, dummy. Yeah, of course not. When you were playing football first, were you able to do throw a nice spiral? I always mess up on that because I'm not a football person. But no. And I'm like, oh, when you play basketball, were you able to knock out those 3-point shots your first shot? I'm like, no. Yes,
Right.
exactly. It takes time. It takes practice. It takes determination. Um, we can name numerous people who've accomplished greatness, but we can see that they were rejected and failed the first time.
Right.
And so that's just something important to remember.
Yeah. And I think the imposter syndrome, I think, can be turned around in its head and be like the stepping stone, right? If we just ask the right questions. Like if you ask yourself, why am I feeling like this? Why do I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'm not worth not going to whatever Stanford, Harvard, or
Yeah.
that I have that nice job? Why do I feel like that? And if you're honest with yourself, I think you can find what's kind of holding you back, right? Whether it's some in your childhood, whether it's somebody said to you, whether it's just something you picked up, right? And once you're able to pinpoint it,
Mm-hmm.
then I think that's really where the healing happens, and that's really where you start saying, okay, well, that's just a thought. Then it's just that, and I'm worth it, and I can definitely get it done.
So check your self doubt, everybody. Check
Yeah.
all those things. And yes, you're right. Where are these feelings coming from? And most of the time, we're just on a constant run, go, 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 go.
Right.
And we don't take the time to reflect upon ourselves, which is extremely important,
Yeah.
because you can't be the best you if you don't identify what the best of you means.
Yeah, I guarantee you, and every sports person, every musician, every mathematician, anybody, after giving a performance or a lecture or they play their game, a basketball game, football game, they'll go back and they'll watch the tapes and they'll
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, where can I do better?
Yeah.
Right? That's what it takes. Right? It's not just like, oh, I did it, I'm great. No, it's a constant thing. It's every day.
And it can easily change based on your mind.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Right.
you can be, going hard. And the only unfortunate thing that we have nowadays is we have social media. It's a great thing, but it's also a bad thing, because I think we are constantly looking for the approval of everybody,
Right.
including people we don't know, right? And if, we have a lot of haters out there. So if they mention something like, oh, well, that was stupid, or, you stuttered when your speech or something, then that triggers us. And then, I've seen so many people go on a bad spiral of self doubt, and it becomes where they can't perform again, or
Right.
um they just they've never had that, like, loss or something like that, so it really affects them where they
Right.
really have like that stage fright again next time that they
Right.
can't do it.
Yeah. I think the ironic thing about social media, like you're saying, is that we spend all this time looking for approval of others, but we spent almost no time asking ourselves, how am I doing? Right? What am I doing tomorrow? Right, to get better.
Yeah.
Right. Instead, we want those likes, right? We want those shares or whatever. But probably the only person, right, that we should be looking for is ourselves, right? And that's probably the person we spend the least time on.
Yeah, and I apologize for all the noise, guys. We're working out of the garage. Once we become big, you guys can afford us a new studio, and we'll work from there. But with social media as well, is that because we are looking all the time, constantly at people's stories, we only see happy news. Like
Right.
typically we only you got to understand that most of social media, if not almost all of it, is all false. And what I mean is that, I wouldn't be posting up my sad stories, and most people only post up the amazing things they're doing. So then, you're like, okay, I want to do this project, but um, I see this other person that I follow, and it looks like it came to them very easy because
Right.
they're showing that they're doing really amazing things, and here I am, can't even get a call back. And so I think it's just very dangerous that we have to always double check that.
Right.
We have to be careful of that. Even with this podcast, that I'm trying to do, is that I already told people I'm mentally prepared to take the challenge of, one, I know everyone's not going to like it. That's fine. I'm not
Mm.
trying to appease people in a sense. I just really want to speak. But I know this is going to take months or years to
Right.
get to where I want it to be at. This success doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It's a long journey.
Yeah. Definitely. I think going back to imposter syndrome, right? It's how much we believe in ourselves, right? It's not about who we're comparing ourselves to, right? It's about, I'm gonna do this project because I believe in it, right? I believe in this. I think I'm worth this project, right? My time is worth it to invest in this project,
Hmm.
right? And it's not about, oh, Elon Musk did this by the time he was 30, or this other person did that by the time they were 40. Nah, it's our own path, right? And we have to seriously believe in our own path. And I think at that point, once you believe in your own path, then you can see the beauty of, oh wow, that person's doing great things, right? Like I
Hmm.
can see the fruits, right? I can imagine how much work you went into that, right? Even
Yeah.
without telling me, I can just, oh man, starting a car company, yeah, good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know you didn't sleep.
Right. And but that takes a lot of self care and a lot of self love to begin with. And kind of going back to the imposter syndrome, right? Trying to understand why we may not believe we fit in a particular place, and then tackling that, and then just gathering all the strength from it, and then move forward.
Yeah, and instead of wanting what others have for yourself, just want what you want for
Right.
yourself. And it's just really important to know that your journey is the right journey. And I also I'm always impressed by everybody. And people are like, how are you impressed by people? I'm literally impressed by people constantly, and every day I'm amazed because just by conversations, I truly genuinely am happy for when others are successful because it brings me joy, especially people of color. I'm like, this is why I'm doing this, right? I just want people to be successful. Like, believe in yourself because I believe in you.
Right.
I may not know you yet, but if you believe in yourself, I believe you can make whatever dreams or goals you have. So definitely, definitely, definitely
Yeah. And I think that,
recognize it.
yeah, I think again that's a good reflection of where you are as a person, right? When you can see the beauty on their struggle, and you can see the, like, deep down how much they must work for something, and I think that's how we can embrace one another, right? Instead
Mm-hmm.
of competing against one each other and things like that. The understanding ourselves, I think, allows us to understand others. Yeah.
Yes. So if any of you are finally listening to this and be like, "Oh my gosh, I finally figured out why I'm feeling this way." Don't worry, you're not alone. I sometimes my mind goes with me every once in a while.
Yeah,
It happens.
it will happen all the time. I would say it probably happens daily, right?
Yes.
And you daily you have to check, well, how am I doing, right? Where did I fail? How can I improve, right? If otherwise it just builds up,
Yeah. Or why do I feel sad all of a sudden?
right?
What's going on?
Right.
So definitely know that you're not alone. If you would like, and obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at planetsave000 at gmail.com. And please like, subscribe, and share this story. And just know that we want to bring the story to you, that we are doing this in 104-degree weather. And it's actually still kind of cool in the desert because it's hot in the Coachella Valley. So just know that we are passionate. We are working to bring you these stories just because we really want the best for everybody here.
Yeah, definitely. Nothing but self love and loving one another and reaching out people. We just want the best for all of us.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank,
Bye.
thank you.